Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from spiritgirl.com and welcome to Feel Good From Within. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Dr. Rebecca Ray, who is a clinical psychologist, author and speaker. Over the course of almost 2 decades of practice, Rebecca, known as Beck, has helped hundreds of big picture thinking people through courses and consultations to live a life that's fulfilling, unapologetic and free. Beck's unique experience has seen her engage with thousands of people and sets her apart as one of Australia's most in-demand voices in the personal development space. Beck is the author of Be Happy, The Universe Listens to Brave, The Art of Self-Kindness, Breakthrough, and Setting Boundaries. This is the third time that Dr. Rebecca Ray will be back on the podcast show. And today we're going to be talking about her brand new book, which is Small Habits for a Big Life. Release the self-sabotaging behaviour that is holding you back one habit at a time. Dr. Rebecca Ray, welcome to the podcast show. How are you today?
Thanks, Yvette. Thanks so much for having me again.
It's so amazing to have you here, and I want to welcome our global audience. I'm so grateful you're here to find out more about Dr. Rebecca Ray and her brand new book. Dr. Rebecca Ray, I've given you a pretty in-depth intro there. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience about yourself before we dive into your book?
I think you covered most of the businessy stuff. That's my public persona. I'm also a wife and a mum and an aspiring miniature Highland cow owner. The most important things about work, I think you've already covered.
I love that. And I love that you have a new picture behind you. So everyone needs to go to the Spirit Girl YouTube channel. The last time we got together, we were speaking about your last book, Setting Boundaries.
Yep, which is now a bestseller in the self-help space in Australia.
Congratulations. That is so incredible.
Thank you.
And now I go into Big W and I see your next book, Small Habits for a Big Life. When did you fit writing this book in, and how did this book come about, and what does this book mean in terms of the title, Small Habits for a Big Life?
I didn't really fit it in. Small Habits for a Big Life started as an Audible original podcast called Breakthrough, Overcome Self-Sabotage, Achieve More, Live Your Best Life. And that podcast on Audible did so well that we decided to turn it into a print book, because lots of people were contacting me and saying, do you have worksheets? Do you have something that I can work through to be able to go through all the tips that you spoke about in the podcast? So that's how Small Habits for a Big Life came into the world in terms of in print. And what Small Habits for a Big Life essentially means is the things that you can do on a daily basis to get out of your own way to be able to live into your potential. Because one of the things I think that people really get caught up in when it comes to developing habits, particularly habits around our lives and the way we're actually living. So rather than just goals, when you're thinking about habits, and the fact that habits make up about 40 to 45% of what we do every single day. So if almost half of what you do every day is a habit and those habits aren't aligned with who you want to be, then unfortunately, there's half of your life that's not consistent with how it is that you want to be showing up. So Small Habits for a Big Life seeks to answer that question. How can you make tiny adjustments in your life to get ever closer to who it is that you want to be and the life that you want to create?
Wow, that's incredible. So when it comes to someone wanting to practice more self-care, because as an example, they've heard exercise or yoga or meditation is good for their mental health and well-being, but they don't feel motivated. They feel out of shape, maybe overweight, just horrible. It's easier to sit on the couch after work because they're exhausted and they just don't have their exercise mojo going on. What would you say to someone when it comes to setting up a self-care ritual when it comes to exercise? So when they're faced with the, don't feel like it, can't be bothered, but they deep down are feeling quite depressed and they want to feel better and they want to look better, but they haven't got the motivation.
The first thing I would say, especially around anything to do with wellness, because it's so easy to get into a shame spiral around wellness and health, is be compassionate with yourself. So rather than sitting on the couch and thinking, I'm lazy, I've let myself go, I've gotten into such bad habits that I'm too scared to see my doctor in case they say things that I don't want to hear. Instead, I would encourage listeners to understand that we do everything because our brains have a reason for it. So you're not lying on the couch watching Netflix because it doesn't work. You're lying on the couch watching Netflix because it does work. And what it works to do is actually help you cope, possibly coping with the busyness of life in Western culture. It could be that it's helping you cope with the demands on your shoulders at work, or with the fact that you've got toddlers and it's just a fast-paced season of life and you can't catch up to catch your breath. So the first thing I would encourage listeners to do is to first understand that your brain has just worked out really easy ways of helping to relieve the discomfort on your shoulders on a daily basis. But what you've identified is that the way that you're coping is not necessarily the way that's going to help you thrive. So rather than shaming yourself, go gently. Just approach yourself from a place of compassion. And then secondly, identify why a habit around exercise is important. Now, you can say to yourself something along the lines of, well, guidelines in Australia around exercise say that it's healthy. But look, I just don't think that's going to cut it. That's probably not going to get you off the couch. Whereas if you identify a value within you, like, I want to live with vitality, and it's really important to me to be outside exploring places in the world that make me feel good in nature. But I can't do that unless I have some kind of fitness. Therefore, you attach those two things to a particular value in your life. Then it's much more likely to get you off the couch, because what you're doing then is focusing on deep down why it's important, rather than just thinking, well, my doctor says I should. My doctor says I should. That's an outward motivation that's unlikely to help you get through the effort of being able to get off the couch and get your shoes on. Now, when it comes to motivation, you asked a question just before, what happens if you've lost your exercise mojo and you just don't feel motivated? I really want to address this because it's so incredibly important. Motivation sucks. So the good news is you don't have to feel motivated. That's the good news. The not so good news is if you sit around waiting until motivation comes, you could be waiting for a very long time, because motivation is a feeling just like any other feeling. Like if you said to me, Yvette, I want to write a book, I'm just waiting until I feel confident, I'd be going, oh, let's not wait for that. Like I'm writing my 6th book and I still don't feel confident. So let's not wait until you have a particular feeling before you do the thing. And it's the same as exercise. If you wait until you feel motivated, then you could be wasting a lot of your time that you really want to commit to because you want your vitality back. So instead, what I encourage people to do is to hack their motivation by using dopamine in the brain. Now, dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain that motivates us to do behaviors over and over again. It's responsible for, think about addiction. It's dopamine, the neurotransmitter in the brain, that says, oh, that feels good, I might do that again. But what we want to do is apply it to healthy habits in our life, because the more aligned your behavior becomes with how it is that you want to live and how you want to create your life, the bigger the hit of dopamine and the better you feel. So let's say I've got to write the next chapter of my next book and I think it's just too hard. I'll go and watch another season of some true crime documentary on Netflix. I do actually do that a lot. I shouldn't do that when I'm writing, right? Now, if I go lay on the couch, I will get a spike in dopamine. We can't ignore that. My brain will actually go, oh, thank God, I don't need to think about writing. I can do something much more pleasant instead. But if we're talking about exercise, if we're talking about even writing, then if I just did the thing that I'm avoiding, that increase in dopamine in my brain is 1,000 times more than if I just avoided it and got the little relief of not having to do the hard thing. It's the same for exercise. So you can lie on the couch and watch a murder documentary on Netflix, and it might feel good in the moment because you think, thank God I don't need to go out and I don't need to walk up hills or whatever it is. I live in a really hilly area, so you can't go for a walk without walking up at least one hill. But If you actually go for a walk, your brain will go, oh, think of these fireworks in your brain that go, oh my goodness, we actually did it. We were outside breathing fresh air. We got to see the birds flying and the sun setting, and it was all really beautiful. The hit that you get in your brain for being who you want to be is so much richer than the hit that you get sitting on the couch. So instead of waiting around for motivation, I want you to hack your brain instead through action, because it's action that you can control. So rather than thinking, oh, hold on a second, how do I actually convince myself to go for a walk? I want you to think about, in an hour's time, how is your brain going to feel?
I love that. And I totally can resonate with that. Example, Monday, I've been avoiding walking up this really big hill, which is 298 meters above sea level with 1,400 stairs. And for the last 3 months, I've convinced myself that I'm not fit enough. It's too hard. It's uncomfortable. And I've done flat walks.
Yep.
And I tussled with this on Monday for what seemed like more than an hour in my head. Should I do the flat walk? Should I feel uncomfortable? Oh, this is horrible. It all went on. I decided I'm doing it. We're doing it. And I did it.
Amazing.
And I surprised myself. I was actually fitter than I expected. You mentioned that dopamine high.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm doing it. I'm walking.
Isn't it good?
Oh my goodness. I'm overcoming my uncomfortable feelings.
Yes.
And I really got that high from when I eventually got to the top and being able to walk up all those stairs. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh, why have I been telling myself I couldn't do this?
And that's the thing. Sometimes your brain will convince you or try to convince you that you can't do something. And you need the evidence that that's actually inaccurate. Otherwise, your brain just continues playing a particular story. Like, I can't do 1,400 stairs. It's too much. So I'll just continue on the flat walk until I'm ready. And ready is also another myth, because there's no such thing as a permanent state of readiness. Whereas now that you just kind of got over yourself and did the thing, all of a sudden you've proved to your brain, hold on a second, the stories you were telling me were inaccurate. I'm actually much fitter than what I thought. So what's now possible? And this is what happens. The more that you expand your world with habits that challenge you, then the more you actually find life opens up.
Another example is sit-ups. I hate them with a passion because they're so uncomfortable. They hurt. Yeah. It's like I've been overweight twice, 25 plus kilos. Exercise to me, I've still got to just set the routine. But I was like, nah, I've got to do it. It's hard. It's going to suck. Yeah. We're doing it. So I did 10 minutes.
10 minutes of sit-ups straight.
It was a yoga sit-up class.
Okay, right.
It's the first time, once again, in 3 months, I'm like, nope, we've got to do what's hard. It's uncomfortable. My brain wanted to go where it was comfortable. My brain said, let's not do that. Let's just stretch. Is that a common thing that our brain tries to protect us from what's hard?
Absolutely. This is why we end up on the couch watching Netflix instead of walking up the stairs or doing the class, because your brain is a master at being able to help you to avoid discomfort. And what we need to do is essentially train our brains to accept discomfort in the service of growth rather than discomfort for discomfort's sake that we create for ourselves via avoidance. So even though watching the true crime documentary is heaps more comfortable than writing the next chapter in my book, it's not helping me get closer to my deadline. So I get short-term relief for even longer-term pain by doing that. Right. My brain is going, but it will feel better. We'll do it tomorrow. But if I said that enough times, then I'd pass my deadline without submitting a manuscript. And my brain would be so stressed because of that. So what we need to do is to be able to be so connected to our values that we're able to go, actually, no, the discomfort of doing this thing right now is more important, and I will get a bigger hit of being in alignment with where I want to go than the short-term relief of avoidance.
And do you think that when it comes to, say, setting up a self-care ritual for exercise, that it's practical if someone's a busy mum or dad or whoever's tuning in, they're super busy, that even setting an action of 5 minutes and starting small, then not starting at all, is the way to go?
1,000%. This is what psychologists call the science of small wins. But for our listeners that are perfectionistic like me, my brain is perfectionistic, but my actions are no longer perfectionistic. So I'm what Brene Brown would call a recovering perfectionist. What you see outwardly is not me being perfectionistic anymore, but that doesn't stop my brain from still telling me stories. So my brain will say 5 minutes is rubbish. If I don't go for at least 45 minutes, it doesn't count. Right? Now, that is absolutely not at all helpful because I'm the busy mum that you're describing, right? And perhaps lots of our listeners are too. Because if your brain then says you've got to do 45 minutes or nothing, then it stops you from being able to do tiny habits that actually make a huge difference in the long term. We're not talking about things that are wellness based either. I mean, exercise is important, yeah, but we could be talking about reading, meditating, those things. If you read for 5 minutes, if you meditate for 5 minutes, they have huge effects over time. So what I'm more interested in helping people do is actually create consistent tiny habits rather than huge dramatic gains that means that they've got to change their entire life in order to be able to fit it in. The science of small wins means that your brain is gathering evidence every time you do something tiny. You could have chosen to do a flat walk plus 1 step, or a flat walk plus 20 steps out of the 1400 and built up over time. Now, for some people, they do really respond to doing something dramatic. My brother's like that. He loves to do huge goals and he trains intensively for like 6 months, then does the thing and then doesn't do a thing for 12 months after that. It's really all or nothing. But for people who are super busy and they have lots of life demands on their shoulders, when we're talking about the habits that are going to make a difference for you over time, for the alignment with who you want to be in the life that you're creating, consistency matters so much more than perfection. So instead of thinking that you need to bloody do 45 minutes and transform your diet as well and start taking protein shakes and also read 10 self-development books a month, calm down. Let's just do 5 minutes, walk the dog for 5 minutes, sit outside and stand in the grass for 5 minutes. When we're talking about self-care, sometimes it's simply about introducing something that gives us pleasure that we don't give ourselves permission to do.
I love those words of wisdom, and I can resonate. When I was trying to set exercise for an hour or 45, I didn't do it at all because I'm like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, okay, I'm just going to start 5 minutes, then I went up to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, 25. And my go-to is if I can do 30 minutes. But then some days, every day varies, but as long as it's 5, 10, 15. So I'm glad that you reiterated that. You've been writing, once again, another book, and it's launched and it's out everywhere online on booktopia.com.au, in Big W, Kmart, every retail store, everywhere. So when you wrote this, what was your self-care rituals and what are they looking like now as a busy mum?
I was working on the edits for Small Habits at the beginning of the year. And so we're talking summer in Australia. My self-care then was swimming. We're now chatting at the end of winter right now. I do not swim in winter because it's too cold. And so my self-care is I like bang for my buck. So actually this afternoon I will do this. When I pick Bennett up from kindy, I take my dog. I have 3 senior dogs. Only one is young enough to be walked. He's 9. The other 2 are 10 and 13. And so I take Jet with me and we go to the park. There's a kilometre track around the park. And so Bennett and I walk Jet around the park and then we play at the park so that he can have some fun as well. And I like combining all of those 3 things. I get outside for some fresh air. Now, this is not necessarily my exercise because we don't really walk fast enough. I can't walk fast enough to get my heart rate up when I'm walking with a 4-year-old. But it gets me outside and away from my desk because when I'm writing, I spend way too much time sitting. So it's really important that I stand and then move. But also I get to see Bennett and Jet happy and just those small things to be actually away from my phone, pushing Bennett on the swing and then just looking at Jet's face because he gets so excited and his tail wags in circles when we're going for a walk. It's those things that fill me up. They're like You know how there's those cliches where people say, oh, the best things in life are free, blah, 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 blah. These are just really small life pleasures for me that I deeply love. And they're just the things that I know are going to count. You know, when I'm 80 and I'm looking back on my life, they will be the memories that I think of. You know, the times that I spent with my animals and my children. And Nissa, my wife, would be coming with us, except she's working this afternoon. So she would often be there as well. And it's family time. So my self-care is often different to the habits that I do to kind of help my wellness, because I don't love exercise. Exercise is something that I do because it reduces inflammation. It makes my job easier because I do sit so much. If I'm moving, then I can sit for longer without pain. So it's actually really helpful. But I don't go, oh, yes, like look at me going to a PT session. I bloody hate PT, but I do it twice a week. Because it's good for my bones, right? And we're talking about self-care, then it's things like that, or it's listening to an audio book, something I also love doing. Most of my reading is via audio books because it's just easier for me to take in more information. And then small habits that I do around my health are different to, well, I don't class them as self-care. They're great for my health, but they're not necessarily pleasant.
But I love that reminder of the cultivating, spending time with our family, children, out in nature, with our dogs, pets, and that being a small habit that can fill our cup up, make us feel fulfilled, and really nourish our soul. So this book, when you talk about small habits for a big life, this can relate to anything, whether it's relationships, family, career, whatever you want to create in your life.
Absolutely. In fact, I think exercise is only one of the examples I use in the book. I talk about so many other things, relationships, different areas of your life where you want to get on track. I mean, you might be thinking about what are the small financial habits I need to have in place to make a big difference to my future? We're talking about any kind of area that you could sabotage yourself, that you want to realign with who it is that you want to be.
I love that. What is your hope for your newfound book readers?
I really hope that they pick up the book and they see a way forward out of where they've been feeling stuck. Because so many people think, I've ruined it now. I've been stuck in this cycle of self-sabotage for so long. I'll never get to where I want to go. I would love people to pick up the book and go, actually, it's not as hard as what I thought it was going to be. And all I need to do is these small things. And all of a sudden I interrupt that cycle. And like I said, I can hack that part of my brain to turn on the fireworks of being who I want to be.
I love that. How can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
Listeners can find me at rebeccaray.com.au. That's my home on the internet where all my courses are available and other digital products and mentoring as well. And I'm on the socials as at Dr. Rebecca Ray, mainly over at Instagram. That's where I'm most active because that's where most of my people are. And Small Habits for a Big Life is in all good bookstores and online retailers in Australia and New Zealand and the US, surprisingly. I did not know that was going to happen. And you can find my other books all over the place as well.
Congratulations again, Dr. Rebecca Ray. I'm so grateful. I did see that you're on TV, on the Australian TV. Yes, and you were talking about small habits for a big life. I have just seen your author journey explode and go from one level to the next, and it's been so exciting to see. I'm so grateful that we had this opportunity today to talk and to share your words of wisdom, tips, hacks with our audience. Thank you so much again. I'm so grateful. I loved the book, learned a lot. I think my biggest takeaway was I learned more about how the brain worked. And it explained more that it's just not me.
Exactly.
Feeling lazy or unmotivated. It's actually the way that the brain works. So thank you for reiterating that. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening into this Spirit Girl podcast episode. I hope you found this conversation of interest and benefit to you. In support, I would love for you to subscribe to Feel Good From Within with Yvette Le Blowitz Spirit Girl podcast and to leave a 5-star rating and a review of what you think too. Be sure to share this show with your family, friends and community and to subscribe to my mailing list at spaitgirl.com, yvettelebloitz.com and feelgoodfromwithin.com. And to follow Spirit Girl or Yvette Le Blowitz on any social media app. And together, let's feel good from within.